Om Swastiastu, welcome to Usada, Bali. We offer our cultural, medicinal, and artistic content from Ubud, Bali. Your generosity will help support our artists, practitioners, and staff, and is gratefully appreciated.
To those of you who are joining from other parts of the world, my name is Maya Kerthyasa. I'm a food writer, and I'm going to be talking today about the wisdom and teachings of culinary practices here in Bali. For those of you who don't know me, I'm half Balinese. My father is from here in Ubud, and my mother is from Sydney in Australia. And I spent about a decade, or just under a decade, living in Sydney, working at a food magazine. But there came a time where I decided to come home, to come back to Bali. And when I came back, I found myself somewhat overwhelmed, you could say, with the culture. Because Balinese culture, as beautiful as it is to observe from the outside, is a very complex and multifaceted culture. It's the type of culture that you really have to live and breathe and be a part of from birth to truly understand. So coming back into the culture, I realized that I had so much to learn. And as much as I tried to read and as much as I tried to just purely understand, I'd missed out on formative years of education the Balinese way, which is truly practice in the field. So learning from your elders, from your parents, from your grandparents, excuse me, and even from your community. And so being a food writer and being interested in food, I found myself naturally drawn into the kitchen. And I'm very lucky to have a grandmother who's an incredible cook and a kitchen at home that is a very traditional Balinese kitchen. We still cook over wood fire, it's all open air, it's full of smoke and soot and all kinds of other wonderful things. And so I was very lucky to have this kitchen as a space of education, a place of learning for me. And what I learned and what I observed is what I want to share today. And I just want to emphasize that these are very much my own experiences, the wisdom of my family that my family has shared with me. But I think there are some really beautiful messages that we can take from the traditional kitchens of Bali into this very confusing world that we're living in at the moment. Excuse me, I have a little tickle in my throat. So I read a really interesting article recently by an author called Pollan. He's an American author, and he's written a lot about food and our global attitudes towards food, I guess you could say. And one of the things he pointed out was the culture of efficiency. Efficiency and what I like to call convenience. We're so obsessed and in this cycle of convenience and efficiency that in our food systems, and he was talking about America specifically, but I think this counts for many other parts of the world, we've lost our fundamental connection with nature. And this is where I find the Balinese kitchen, or the traditional Balinese kitchen, so unique in that it really draws the cook and the diner very close to nature. But not only nature, also the spirits. Because in Bali, we are part of a larger cosmos, a universe. We have the ground, Mother Earth below us. We have us in the human realm. And then, of course, we have the spiritual realm, or the realm of the gods. And in order for everything to function harmoniously, we need to be grateful, for all of these three layers of our cosmos. And interestingly enough, the simple act of cooking can draw us closer to just that. So my experience of learning this was through cooking with my grandmother. The journalist in me was very hungry, pardon the pun, to learn more, I guess, about the recipes, Balinese cooking from a very technical point of view. But when I entered the kitchen and I started to learn firsthand from my grandmother, I realized that I had to put my notepad down, I had to put my camera away, and really allow this wisdom that she was passing through to me to download. It was almost like an energetic download between me and my Niang, as I like to call her. And what I was learning was that I was not just dealing with raw ingredients. What I was dealing with were gifts from the creative powers of the universe. And the first place that I noticed this was when I stepped into the traditional kitchen, and my grandmother explained to me the symbolism behind the various parts of the kitchen and the elements that are associated with different gods and deities. So when you walk into a Balinese kitchen, it is like walking into an altar of sorts. Yeah, so we give offerings to Lord Brahma, the god of creation and the god of fire, by the flames of the stove. Yeah, and then Vishnu, the preserver, is represented by the element of water. So we leave a little offering for Vishnu at the faucet in a modern kitchen, or a water tub in a more traditional kitchen. And then we have Dewi Sri, who's the goddess of rice, fertility and abundance. And she's represented in the curves of the traditional rice steamer, which we call a dangdang. And so by applying the image or characteristics of a deity or a god to the various elements that help turn our food from raw ingredients into edible sustenance, we automatically have a new level of respect for our food. And not only our food, but the processes that are involved in turning our food from one thing to another. Something that is, possibly inedible before it's cooked, and then transformed by the elements, and because of how we align them, transformed by the gods or the creative forces into something that gives us life force. And this for me really changed my whole perspective of how I looked at cooking. And then the process involved in that changed it even further. Because I don't know how familiar you all are with Balinese cooking, but it's not the easiest type of cuisine. Yeah, it's not the simplest, most straightforward way of cooking that there is around. It's very complex, it's very intricate. Each recipe, each dish is backed by a very complex base of spices. Yeah, the basic spice paste, basa gede or basa ganap, it changes from kitchen to kitchen, from regency to regency, but at its base, there's ginger, galangal, lesser galangal, turmeric, candle nuts, pepper. Some people add lemongrass. As I said, it's very diverse. But this complex spice mix, combined with all the other ingredients that you put into the dish, all have to be prepared in a very almost meditative way. So one way that we prepare spices is we chop them up very, very, very thinly or very finely. Another way is that you pound them, and it's very hard work. I tell you, you get great arms, into a paste. Meats are often twice cooked. Even rice, the simplest thing on the menu, is twice cooked. And so there's this process. There's a process that goes from morning, before the sun rises often, to late morning in a traditional kitchen. Yeah, so you need to wake, you need to light your fire, you need to gather your wood if that's what you have. You need to sacrifice your bird if that's what's on the menu, or your pig, or whatever other protein you're working with. You need to go to the garden and get your vegetables. You have no choice but to fully immerse yourself in the act of cooking. And what that process gives us is total presence, a total state of focus. We have no choice but to completely submit to the act of cooking. And what that does is that it clears our mind. One of the things my grandmother taught me was you must never cook with a busy mind or with bad intentions. You have to go into the kitchen with a pure heart, pure intentions, and a completely clear mind. Because you are in a sacred space, you're in the presence of the gods. And so I really took that in, and I tried, and no matter how hard I tried to cook with a distracted mind, I was trying to challenge myself here, I couldn't. I had to put all distractions away, because not only is the process so intricate and requires so much of our time and attention, but it also, you're dealing with real elements here, fire, big, sharp knives, things that you wouldn't want to cut your hand on or burn yourself. So you really have to become a part of the process. And that presence is something very special, because it creates a whole different energy around the meal. My grandmother cooks with her hands. I don't even think she owns a wooden spoon. I don't even think she ever uses a metal spoon. Everything is done by hand, or with the natural cooking tools or implements of the Balinese kitchen. Most of which, in a very traditional setting, come from natural elements. So we use a lot of coconut shells as scoops. We also put coconut shell in the fire. Our chopping boards, our ones at home, are made from jackfruit wood. And a lot of the pots and things that we store water in are made from earth. And so without even realizing, your body is constantly in contact with the elements of nature. Yeah? And that's also a very important thing to take into account, because we need to be in harmony with nature in order to access all of the things that we cook with. Not just our ingredients, but also the tools that we use in the kitchen. And this emphasis on harmony is something that I really want to talk about, because there's another important aspect to Balinese cooking, which is purpose. And one of the main purposes is to create harmony, not just harmony with nature, which is a very important part of it, but harmony on the palate. And so the reason, in my opinion, why Balinese recipes have so many different ingredients is because it's all about balance. Balance is one of the hallmarks of life in Bali, or spiritual life. We're always trying to achieve balance in everything that we do. We acknowledge that with good there is bad. We need to know what darkness is to experience light. And it's the same with cooking. So in each recipe, we're trying to accomplish a balance between the 6 tastes. Yeah, we call it sad rasa. So there's sweet, salty, sour, spicy, bitter, and astringent. And achieving balance across all these 6 tastes also reflects on the idea of achieving balance within our emotional self and our spiritual self. We want to have a meal that encourages us to be balanced in our constitution. So it's about health as well, but also how we are as a person. We can't be sweet all the time. It's also not a good idea to be bitter all the time. But by balancing all of this through our food, which is something that's very much consumed and goes within us and does hold an energy, we have the ability to exist in a more balanced and hopefully peaceful way. And then there's the constitutional factor. Now, I'm no medical expert, but I do know that Balinese food is extremely healthy when it's at its purest. I just look at my grandmother. She's 93, we think, and she's extremely fit and healthy. I mean, she's fitter than I am. She wakes up at 5 o'clock every morning, walks up about 100 stairs and does her gardening. She's incredible. And I really think this comes down to her diet. But she's also very conscious of her diet, and she alters it to suit her constitutional needs. So a nice way to sum it up is you are what you eat. Yeah. So if you're naturally hot-headed, such as me, perhaps lay off the chili. If you're stubborn, as a friend of mine gave me a lovely example of the other day, perhaps you should lay off the goat. Yeah. So there is an association with the characteristics and traits of what we're eating and how they reflect within ourselves. Yeah. And this idea of harmony is being spoken about a lot all around the world at the moment. I really believe that Balinese Wisdom is having a very special moment. And for those of you who have been tuning into Usada's channels, you may have heard my brother speaking yesterday and over the past few weeks about Trihita Karana, yeah? The principle of harmony between humans to humans, harmony between humans to nature, and harmony between humans and the divine. And this very much applies to our food culture in Bali, all 3 tiers of it. And we've spoken a little bit about the connection between humans and nature, but I want to go back to that because that begins outside of the kitchen, on our farms, and not just in our agricultural spaces, but also in our homes. Because what's very interesting for me about the food of Bali is that the native ingredients, as a journalist observing from the outside coming in, fly very much under the radar. In fact, the cuisine itself flies very much under the radar in other parts of the world. And this always baffled me because I grew up eating Balinese food and I loved it so much, and I was confused about why nobody talked about it. But it wasn't until I understood, the way that we cultivate these wild and native foods and the true diversity of the cuisine, that I realized it's very hard to kind of define. Yeah, and that's probably why it's very hard to talk about. And it's also why it's difficult to replicate in restaurants. My family is in the restaurant business, and we have excellent Balinese food at home, and one half of our family is Balinese. But at our restaurant, my mother has expressed to me that it's extremely difficult to replicate these recipes because they're so complex. They require so much process, presence, and the real native ingredients are super local, hyper localized. These are things like, if you live in the rice fields, rice field crabs, frogs, dragonflies, insects. There are all kinds of native fruits and amazing leaves like mango tree leaves, papaya leaves, cassava leaves, young fern tips, the leaves of the Javanese long pepper, all kinds of incredible wild and foraged ingredients that a lot of people have growing in and around their family land, or they go to areas like the gulls, which are food forests, and they harvest them from there. And the thing about wild ingredients, or ingredients that aren't farmed, is that they are available to us based on nature's ability and willingness to provide them. Yeah, and in Bali we are respectful of that. We don't, for the most part these days, squeeze everything we can out of nature and force her to deliver based on our needs. We're respectful of the fact that nature has her own cycle. And instead of forcing nature, we instead commit sacrifice. We have sacrificial rituals called yajna, where we pay our gratitudes to nature. And we sacrifice our time, our energy, and we make offerings, often which are offerings of food to Mother Earth, to the universe, as a way of saying thank you for providing to us this food, which is very different from modern farming or contemporary farming or the modern culture around eating, which is all about growing too much, too fast, and consuming it without any thought. This is something that I feel is very, very special. And it's one of the biggest lessons I feel other parts of the world could take from Bali, particularly at this very interesting time. And we're seeing in many parts of the world, people are confused about how to handle all of this. And in Bali, although we are not exempt at all from the bad effects of COVID, we are fortunate in that we can still access nature on a regular basis. And there's still an opportunity for us to go back and learn the wisdom of our elders and bring that back into our everyday lives. Because for the most part, and unfortunately there has been a lot of development and a lot of modernization, I guess you could call it. But for the most part, most of us can put our hands in some soil, and most of us still have our parents or our grandparents to educate us about what native and wild foods are still growing all around us. And this is something that I am strongly passionate about. And I hope that with this time that we're all spending at home, many people around Bali can start to re-embrace and relearn this very special ancient knowledge that has been bestowed upon us by our ancestors and by the fact that we pray every day and we give back to Mother Earth. It's very interesting, even if you're very far away from the agricultural life here. I work as a writer. I'm in no way a woman of the land, I guess you could say. But no matter whether you're a banker or you live overseas or you work in the city, our lives here are so intrinsically tied to nature and to the spirits because we have calendars, that revolve around the cycles of the moon and the cycles of the crops. And this, I think, is so special because everything we do, every significant action, whether we're building a new house or we're planting a new crop or we're going to get married, relates back to the rhythms and the laws of nature. We can't escape her. And that really is a gift. And we also have the cultural structures that have helped preserve our agricultural culture, I guess you could say. Agriculture here is much more than just planting something and hoping that it will grow. There is ritual based around it. There is ceremony Yeah, there's a very strong tie between human to land and to God. And our corporation, the Subak, which has been spoken about a lot at the moment as well, has done some incredible work in preserving that. They are the guardians of not only our irrigation system, but our rice land and our agricultural land. And they manage, they protect, and they handle all the blessings. Yeah, and I think it's really beautiful that we have an opportunity to connect with our food and our land in a way that is not just about consumption, but also about giving back and acknowledging and being grateful. And then, of course, I touched on this a little bit earlier, but there's the medicinal side of Balinese food, which is something that also brings us back to learning from our elders. Yeah. My grandmother makes an oil, and it has about 11 different barks, and there's fruits, and there's even grasshoppers. She holds the recipe very close to her, so it's hard to really get to the bottom of it. But this oil is something that people come from all over the island to ask for as a medicine. And very talented cooks know how to do that with food as well. And this is a kind of wisdom that right now is a wonderful time for us to relearn and reabsorb, because it is something that could disappear if we get carried away with modern life. But it's so important because it keeps this energy of magic, around Balinese cooking that I also want to talk about. I feel it's really special. Oftentimes I've had access to life in the East and the West, so I can speak for both camps here, but I find that sometimes we try and over-dissect and over-analyze and over-speculate about things. And one thing about life in Bali, particularly in the kitchen, I found, trust me, I have tried to ask so many questions to my grandmother to get the exact measurements, to get the exact recipe, to get to the bottom of everything that I'm trying to learn. But one thing that is very unique to Bali is that there is this air of mystery about everything, We don't need to have the exact answers. Some things just are the way they are because that's how they've been for years, or that's how our ancestors passed it down to us. And this instills an amazing sense of intuition to the Balinese cook. There isn't this ambition to know exactly how everything is going to go all the time. And this applies to other areas of life. It's fun because it is spontaneous cooking in Bali. We might find fern tips, we may not find fern tips. We might have coconut, or we might not have access to it. And so we are drawn into a very intuitive state, and it's very relaxing to exist like this. And I think this is maybe one of the reasons why, people say Balinese people are very relaxed. We go with the flow, and it's very much that way in the kitchen. Despite the process, despite the spiritual alignment, despite the seriousness of some of the things I've just described, there is a beautiful air of mystery and relaxed attitude that is very unique and makes it very approachable. Even though the recipes are very intricate and complex, people will be more than happy to show you how to do it. And I can guarantee that once you do that, you will feel a completely different energy in your food, and you might even feel different within yourself. And so this wisdom that Bali is showing us, or has shown me through the kitchen, is something that, although we may not be able to replicate exactly at home because we don't have a traditional kitchen with a wood-fired stove or the same ingredients, it is something that we can take into our daily lives. And I would like to encourage people to do that, because for me personally, it's changed my attitude towards food, even to the places that I choose to eat when I'm not eating at home. And what this is to ask yourself before you cook every meal, was the food that I'm eating cultivated in line with the rhythms of nature? Am I producing this food consciously and thoughtfully? And am I also consuming it thoughtfully and consciously? And I guarantee you, if you all try that, there will be a completely different energy to your food. And what more beautiful way to pay respect to Mother Nature than to give gratitude for what she has given you and what you're about to ingest back into your body. Because at the end, we're all connected. Yeah, and the food that we're eating is a little slice of the universe. And to treat it with respect and to teach others to treat it with respect in the way that it is treated in Bali, it's almost revered. Yeah, it is an offering in a sense. It is an element of the divine. I feel if we all adopt this into our daily lives in one way or another, we could make a big difference to our global attitude towards food. And that is what I wanted to share today. I'm very humbled to have been asked to speak about this topic here at Usada. It's something that's very close to my heart, and I hope that it helps everyone who has listened to this talk today get a deeper understanding of our attitude and culture towards food here in Bali, and how it might help to heal the world in one way or another. Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching. If you find our videos informative and helpful, please consider contributing to our effort by donating at www.paypal.me/usadaubud.